Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and what's that old bean? Runs a podcast, old bean? Well, don't try to box Johnny in. He's going to go crazy with the podcast, old bean.
I don't know which character you're quite...
Yes, you do. He always says "old bean." You know exactly what I'm talking about.
He does, but I feel like the voice was a little close to your Cary Grant. So
that's over here, and what's that old bean? He's over here. See, over here.
You've really worked hard for a long time on getting that Cary Grant. I was just listening to our Mission Impossible 2 episode the other day, and you're doing your Cary Grant impression on that episode. So,
well, he was great in that movie. So
he was so good in that. Yeah. And he's good in this film we are about to talk about here. This is a special bonus episode for our season on the films of 1941. And we decided for this season's bonus, we would finally talk about the great filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock, who we have not talked about before, even though I believe we've done at least a couple years when he made a movie. And we just didn't fit in something of his. So we decided to talk about his 1941 film, Suspicion, starring Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine. And it's not necessarily regarded as one of Hitchcock's best, but this is from a period where Hitchcock was just on top of the world. And even his lesser work, I think, from this era is still very, very good.
Yeah, I think you could say that about Cary Grant, too, who we've talked about 78 times now.
We're going to keep talking about Cary Grant until you get that impression right.
Yeah, it's going to be a long way to go. But, the year before, 1940, Hitchcock won Best Picture for Rebecca. Of course, never won a Best Director Oscar because, the Oscars are so smart what they do. But, and this is one of four, and I think the first collaboration between Hitch and Mr. Grant. So I've seen all four of those. It's been fun to compare those. And while I do agree, maybe it's not in the category of like a Rear Window and this or that, like it's a well-regarded film.
It is. It is a well-regarded film overall. And it was a successful film when it came out. Joan Fontaine also, who stars in this film, was the star of Rebecca. And so this was her second collaboration with Hitchcock. And you are correct that the first of four collaborations between Hitchcock and Cary Grant. But yes, this was a successful film. It grossed $1.8 million in its original release and $4.5 million over time. Like many, many Hitchcock movies, it's been re-released. I'm sure it'll continue to get re-released on its budget of $1.1 million. It was nominated for 3 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Original Score, and it won Best Actress for Joan Fontaine, the only time an actor has won an Oscar for a Hitchcock film. And I think Joan Fontaine is very good in this, but that does seem like an odd choice for the only acting win ever for a Hitchcock film.
Well, going back to Cary Grant, who we said has been overlooked by the Oscars, go to North by Northwest, which I think, or Notorious, there are so many women. We can go to The Birds. We can go to Anthony Perkins in Psycho, who's not a lady, but does play a lady in part of it. There's 100 between Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, all the great women of Hitchcock. It's just, I rewatched, or I didn't rewatch it. I watched To Catch a Thief, and Grace Kelly's great in that movie. So ridiculous. Oscars, shame on you.
Right, and even Joan Fontaine, again, very good in this, but Rebecca is such a higher achievement for both her and Hitchcock, I think, just the year before, which did win Best Picture, but she didn't win for that. But still, this was acknowledged at the Oscars and successful at the box office. It was based on the novel Before the Fact by Francis Iles, although toned down a lot. The plot here that Joan Fontaine's kind of meek spinster in waiting falls in love with Cary Grant's scoundrel. We could call him a scoundrel, I think. And over time discovers his scoundrelous nature and then suspects him of being even worse and possibly being a murderer and possibly plotting to murder her. And in the book, he's much worse. He's cheating on her. He fathers a child outside of their marriage. He's stealing blatantly, like brazenly. and is much more obviously, although it's still somewhat ambiguous, perhaps intending to murder her. But in part because Cary Grant is such a beloved movie star, they had to tone that down and make him a little less evil in this version.
Thumbs down to that concept. When reading about the changes from the book, I was like, oh man, the book would have made a more interesting movie. Hitchcock is both on record, and people are on record as saying he did not approve or he did approve. There's no real clear answer to if this is what he wanted and or the studio wanted. Obviously, the probably studio wanted it, but there was no answer as to Hitchcock agreed or not. But when we get into the details, there are some perfect examples of where that kind of more nefarious version could have elevated this film.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, I feel like the book seems like, and obviously none of us have read it, but it seems like maybe it's less about the central theme of this movie, which is the paranoia, the idea that it's easy to spiral from my husband did this one thing that was bad or lied to me about something to assuming the worst. And in order for that to really work, he can't be too blatantly evil because then it's just that she's correct.
I agree with you on that. I didn't need like him cheating on her and having bastard children, Josh, going around. Oh, that's my little bastard Banjo over there. Banjo the bastard. I don't need that. But I do think that, shading it a little more evil would have elevated it in some ways.
Yeah, maybe so. And of course, we'll talk about this more. Maybe
because Josh, sorry to interrupt, but how many situations were we in where it was like, she's paranoid and he's like, no, I just went to write a letter to my cousin. No, I just went to get your coat fixed. They're all just little things like, not only was I not doing something bad, I was actually doing something nice for you.
Right. And in some of those cases, he's lying. And we learn that he's lying because he's not perfect. Certainly. He is not a good husband. He does a lot of bad things. It's just that he doesn't murder anybody. So it's a mix of that, which I think is what's effective, that sometimes she's worried and there's a reasonable explanation for what he did. And he actually didn't do the bad thing that she thought he did. But sometimes he did do a bad thing and lie about it to her. It's just not murder.
Yeah. More murders.
More murders is what Jason wanted out of this film.
There's only really one.
There is, and we don't really know who committed that murder, or even if it was technically murder at all. But it wasn't Johnny. It wasn't Cary Grant who did that murder.
It definitely was not Old Bean.
No, Old Bean was the victim.
Well, I think in the book, he referred to Johnny as Old Bean. That's what I was saying.
True. Yes, yeah. So, but I think in the book he does kill that guy. Like it's clear that he kills both that guy and the wife's father, who in the film just dies of natural causes.
And the thing is, I really didn't need him to, and I don't think it would have. I didn't want him to kill the best friend, and it wasn't necessary to kill the father. So, like, those weren't the things. I just feel like we went so far the other way into like, see, yeah, he's all right. He's all right there. You don't have to worry about him. That's where I kind of was. It's still a Hitchcock movie, so it's still pretty damn good. But I think, there were a few missed things here.
Yeah, and especially the ending that really goes hard on what you were just describing. Although I think you could still read it as she's reassured in that moment, but how are things going to play out over time? But it does kind of rush into like, see, everything's okay. She worried for nothing. Which again, even if the guy's not a murderer, is not true.
Right. It's not like your favorite film, Gaslight.
Right. It actually is like my favorite film, Gaslight, which is not my favorite film, but is a good film. And I mean, it's a similar thing about there are a lot of Gaslight-ish moments here where, like you said, he's telling her like, oh no, what are you talking about? I was just doing this. It was totally innocent. And he's lying about it.
Yeah.
And that is similar, making her feel like she's paranoid. But it's justified in some way.
The film that and I know you rewatched it recently, and it is apropos because we talked about Humphrey Bogart earlier this year on The Maltese Falcon. Nicholas Ray's in A Lonely Place, and the kind of insane paranoid urges that character gets, I think, is a really good companion piece, and maybe executes that a little better than this.
Yeah, it does. And I did rewatch that, and that's a great film. And I think that has a similar perspective in that Gloria Graham's character there does get very paranoid about, is Humphrey Bogart a murderer? And he isn't a murderer, but he is very bad. He's a bad guy. And he's worse than Johnny in a way, because he's violent. He's beaten women and things like that we never get any indication that Johnny has done. So I think that movie is more willing to go into the darkness of that versus this one, where maybe because of Cary Grant's star status or whatever, they had to give it a more hopeful ending versus the ending of In a Lonely Place.
Unlike Humphrey Bogart, who was not a star at all.
Well, true. But maybe Humphrey Bogart's image as a star was not quite the same.
But Josh,
he was able to do that.
So just to show you the complexities of that film, which we're not covering.
Right.
You mentioned Gloria Graham. I was thinking the paranoia that the Bogart character encounters based on the accusations and, kind of people pushing it. Yeah, he's got his own issues, obviously, like you said, but it gets heightened based on the way people treat him. So, just shows how many levels that was working on.
Yeah, that is a very good movie. And the other thing about that film, because I did just watch it and write about it, is it was an independent production, Humphrey Bogart's own production company, versus this as a studio film. And so maybe there's less interference, from the higher ups or whatever, saying we have to present the star in a certain way. If Bogart is the producer, he can decide how he wants himself to be presented.
But, Josh, getting back to the film, we are covering Suspicion.
Oh, good idea.
So, Hitchcock, like you said, was on a huge run here and just making at least a movie a year, it felt like at this point in time. It was just, he was just en fuego, sir.
Right. Well, as we said, he's coming off of Rebecca, which just won Best Picture. So, that's certainly at the highest point really you can be. And critics were generally positive about this film. Bosley Crowther in the New York Times said, "Clearly, Mr. Hitchcock's problem is to give this simple story great consequence, to build out of slight suggestions and vague, uncertain thoughts, a mounting tower of suspicion which looms forbiddingly. And this he does magnificently with his customary casualness. One must remark that the ending is not up to Mr. Hitchcock's usual style, and the general atmosphere of the picture is far less genuine than he previously has wrought. But still, he has managed to bring through a tense and exciting tale, a psychological thriller which is packed with lively suspense, and a picture that entertains you from beginning to, well, almost the end."
Yeah, the end isn't done poorly. It just falls a little flat based on what we're expecting from Hitchcock, right? So, in a different hands, maybe you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. But, you're waiting for, talking about, Josh, that I had rewatched a lot of the Cary Grant Hitchcock pieces. I rewatched Notorious, and man, that's got to be one of the simplest, greatest movie endings of all time. It's a person walking out of a house, perhaps, right, with another person. I'm not going to spoil it because you should watch it, but do they get out? Do they not get out? How do they, or how do they not? And it's so, it's handled with such finesse, and it's so perfect that is the legend and the expectation of the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, and I think what this movie does is it builds, as Bosley Crowther is saying, it builds really well. And you've got all this tension, you've got all this suspense, and then it just kind of deflates at the end.
Yeah.
And that can be an interesting technique, and especially if it's about the character's paranoia and finally it comes to a head and she realizes that she's wrong or whatever. But it does feel very abrupt and rushed and anticlimactic, and not in a way where you feel like this was the intent necessarily.
That's like you always tell me, you get really pent up and you got to release, Josh. You didn't get that release. And you are always looking for that release because you got all that pent up in there. You got to release that, Josh. You got to release it, like you always tell me.
That is what I always tell you about Alfred Hitchcock films. So
everyone has their kink. Everyone has their kink, buddy.
So Variety, in their unbylined review, said, "Alfred Hitchcock's trademarked cinematic development of suspenseful drama through mental emotions of the story principles is vividly displayed in Suspicion, a class production provided with excellence in direction, acting, and mounting. Joan Fontaine successfully transposes to the screen her innermost emotions and fears over the wastrel and apparently murderous antics of her husband. Cary Grant, in turn, in a sparkling characterization as the bounder who continually discounts financial responsibilities and finally gets jammed over thefts from his employer. Unfolded at a leisurely pace, Hitchcock deftly displays the effects of occurrences on the inner emotions of the wife.
When you're mounting, you want to release. You don't want to get jammed, Josh.
Yeah.
No, but talking about Grant, who, look, we've talked about it. He's the most charming leading man in the world of all time, maybe. And then you kind of look at the different projects that he did here. Notorious, classic good guy. North by Northwest, kind of classic good guy, but in that kind of on the run type thing. To Catch a Thief, and this a little more, kind of shades of gray, and maybe, and I like the characterization here, but maybe that was seen through a little more in To Catch a Thief.
Yeah, I mean, I think that his charmingness works to the advantage, right? Because you
don't want to believe that he could do those things.
Right. And you need to, furthermore, in the beginning, you need to believe that this kind of sheltered, naive young woman would fall for him immediately. And of course,
who wouldn't?
Right, exactly. It's easy to believe that. And it's easy to get swept up in his charm just the way that she does, while overlooking all the red flags that are there from the beginning. I mean, people warn her and they're correct. Even if she has these overbearing parents who don't want her to marry this guy or whatever, all the warnings about him are right. But you can see how she would ignore that because he's so charming and he sweeps her off her feet, and whether he is actually ultimately after her money or not, he certainly is laser focused. He decides he wants her and he does everything he can to get her from the moment they meet.
Well, he's definitely after the money in some regard, because after the father dies and doesn't leave her really anything in the will, right? He takes a drink and goes up to the painting of the father and is like, you win this one, buddy. That wasn't an impression of everyone, but of anyone, but you know what I mean? Yes. So yeah, he's there. And, one of the things that's tough about this movie is remembering it's 1941, because the whole time you're like, just leave, asshole, Joan Fontaine. But obviously a different time, the novel's the same thing. In the novel, it's like, well, she knows she's going to kill her, but she drinks the milk anyway because she loves him so much. And not to say that people don't stick around in things that they shouldn't stick around in now, but it's a little harder, it was a little more prevalent back then, let's say. And it's hard to watch in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That certainly there were far fewer divorces or marriages breaking up in 1941 than there are now. But at the same time, I don't think it's just the conventions of the time that cause her to stay with him. I mean, given the way that she is warned away from him, like I was just saying at the beginning, you get the impression that if she decided to leave him, her family would embrace that, would say, oh, you've come to your senses. Thank goodness. We're going to take you back in. So I feel like it really is that she does love him, whether he is manipulating her or not. She genuinely has fallen for him and doesn't want to believe that he's terrible and that he's going to do these awful things, even though she sort of can't help herself from thinking it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, and that's why you're the pro, and I'm a little amateur idiot.
No, I feel like you're what you said is correct as well, and that. I mean, this is jumping ahead, but there's a 1988 remake of this, which I did not see, but looking on Letterboxd, a lot of people talking about how this plot makes no sense in 1988, and they haven't updated it in any way.
Yeah, I mean, we get that a lot. I think I told the story on here about in the 2000s, the MGM, I was meeting with them, and they're like, we want an updated take on Mr. Mom. And I'm like, well, it's not relevant anymore. So you have to rebuild the whole thing. And it took me a year to figure out. Then when I figured it out, they're like, yeah, we just moved it to TV, so don't worry.
So. Yeah, well, maybe you can get hired to remake Suspicion.
Mr. Suspicion?
Perfect. Green light. Now.
There we go.
Do it. So finally, Edwin Schallert in the LA Times said, definitely it is an intriguingly different sort of screen offering for this very original movie maker. The very odd narrative exerts what might be almost termed an exotic spell. Suspicion can, perhaps, best be called a psychological thriller, with much more emphasis on the psychological than the thriller part of the description. It is above all else a study, chiefly the study of a woman's mind as affected by extraneous and peculiarly undermining influences. The web is tightly spun so that at times even the audience believes as the woman does. At other times, doubt intrudes. This is where suspicion shines as especially deft and adroit, and loyal also to Hitchcock precedent for keeping both characters and spectators guessing in different ways.
I think it goes back to what I was saying, like in lesser hands, you would just not even really care, but Hitchcock is the master of suspense. So even if the ending falls flat, you're like, and that's probably why part of the ending falls flat is because you're waiting for these, for them to turn the key.
Right. I mean, and I think I have seen this film before, but I forgot how much time it spends where just things are, for the most part, okay. And it's almost like a romantic comedy in the early parts of it. And it's more about their courtship and her family's disapproval and stuff like that before we get to even any hint of something sinister.
And it's well done in that regard, the class and, the kind of keeping up airs in this seemingly small town, which I really did like the setting and how it was used. And just, in the same way, like how Green Was My Valley, everything was like, well, we have to, do this because what will the rest of the town think about us if we don't, right? That type of thing. I thought this was a really effective use of environment, not a surprise. Who's better than Hitchcock at that stuff? And I did like all that interplay with the, different revolving people around the relationship.
Right. And some of that goes away once we get to the suspense. I mean, we don't really see her parents much anymore. Even after the father dies and they go to his funeral, she doesn't really talk to her mother, and we don't see the mother again. And there's all these other kind of single, I don't know if they're single or just like society ladies early in the film who are flocking around Johnny because he's clearly got all these ladies. And they also sort of fall away in the second half of the film. But there is a lot about what you were saying, like, the what will people think of us doing this or that is very, very important to her family and to everyone in this kind of upper class world, which is where Johnny is like an intruder.
So I didn't mind what the those characters going away type thing because we had the great Nigel Bruce as Beaky for
Yes.
that, and Beaky, put him right there with the uncle in Philadelphia Story or Whitnell and I, just a fun side character, just great. What I did mind was that at the beginning we see Isabel, who's the mystery writer, and then she falls away for at least an hour and then comes back in, and she's so relevant to the plot and to the ending. Like, you kind of needed that through line, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like by the time she comes back, I almost forgot that she was somebody. And then they reintroduce her effectively so that you understand what her purpose is. And she does form a key role in the last part of the plot. But yeah, maybe another moment or two with her would have been good. So Jason, you had watched some Hitchcock and Cary Grant, but not this one before.
Right? I had seen Notorious, I think last year when we were doing 1939, and we did Only Angels Have Wings. Take it, Dave. Calling Baranka. Calling Baranka. All right. And then I obviously North by Northwest. I think I rewatched last year too. That one I've seen, all the way back in high school. But North by Northwest is incredible. Notorious is incredible. And I watched To Catch a Thief this weekend. It was a wonderful weekend. I watched 3 Hitchcock Grant movies. Like, who doesn't want that? That's a good weekend right there.
Yeah, I would have loved to do that as well. And I've seen all these movies before, but mostly a long time ago. And so I obviously revisited Suspicion, but not those other Hitchcock and Cary Grant movies. But I would love to. I mean, I remember really liking all of those, especially To Catch a Thief, which I always thought is one of my favorite Hitchcock movies, but would be happy to revisit all of them. I watched an older Hitchcock movie that I'd never seen before just because I thought good to keep filling in those gaps, a film called Murder from 1930 with Herbert Marshall from The Little Foxes, who we just talked about. He was the star of that. And it's not great, but you can see it's an early sound film, and you can see Hitchcock working within the limitations there to do some really creative stuff. that he would perfect later on. So it was worth checking out, but probably not nearly as good as the ones that you watched.
Even the not good ones are probably worth. I mean, it's Hitchcock; they're all worth checking out. I do want to specify, I had not seen this before. This was my first time watching this.
Right. Yeah. And I had seen this as well as those other Grant films, but it felt almost like the first time because it had been so long. So, Dave, had you seen this one before?
I don't think so. I watched at least like 5 or 6 Hitchcock films like 20 years ago or something like that. It's been a long time. The only other one I've seen relatively recently was Rebecca. I watched like 2 years ago or something like that. But yeah, it's been many, many years since I've watched any of these. And I always liked all of them that I've seen. It's just one day I got to deep dive even more because there's obviously a lot to get to.
Yeah, there is a lot. I think I've seen 30 something Hitchcock films, and there's still a decent number from not only from his early period, a lot of which are probably not worth much, but even a few from the height of Hitchcock's career. But I also did rewatch Rebecca a couple years ago because the remake came out, which I thought was sort of unfairly maligned.
Yeah.
But that's a separate.
Yeah, that's kind of chill out, Josh. This is Suspicion, not Rebecca.
We can't possibly talk about some other film.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to say about the background of this film?
You mentioned the screenplay, which I think they did a pretty darn good job on right there. That was written by 3 people, all with relationships to Mr. Hitchcock. That was our friend Alma Reveal, which is Hitchcock's wife, and she helped on Shadow of a Doubt and The Lady Vanishes. That was Joan Harrison, who, from what I read, was either Hitchcock's assistant or had a working relationship with Hitchcock. And she also co-wrote Foreign Correspondent and Rebecca. So that's pretty cool. And Samson Rafelson, it's Rafelson, I think, who wrote The Jazz Singer, dude. Pretty good.
Yeah. And this was a weird combination of like 2 different unrelated screenplays, one of which was an adaptation of the book, and then one of which was an independent thing that Hitchcock had been working on that was similar, and they kind of mashed them all together. And, it did turn out well. Although, as you said, there's a lot of material in the book that might have been more interesting. But maybe we'll talk about that a little more when we come back and get into more of our general thoughts on Suspicion. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this bonus episode for our season on the films of 1941, we are talking about Alfred Hitchcock's Suspicion. And Jason, having watched all of those Hitchcock-Grant collaborations over the last few days, would you put this at the bottom?
This is at the bottom, which is not necessarily an insult to it, because you could put Notorious and North by Northwest up against anything, right? To Catch a Thief has a little more charm, and just that French Riviera setting is really cool. And so this one, I think, and I didn't love the ending of To Catch a Thief. I know you did, but this one, I think, that had the flattest ending, and that probably put it at the bottom for me.
Yeah, I mean, the ending, we've been saying this, and it's in those reviews that I quoted as well, really just is, I think it's hard to, they sort of paint themselves into a corner here, that if you want the ending to be somewhat unresolved, it's hard to get that balance right and not have it just be she gets murdered like she thought she would be, or even necessarily she's completely wrong, because there's still hints of maybe things aren't great. And even if she was wrong about the whole murder deal, like, he's not a good guy. He's not a good husband. He really did lie to her. He really did embezzle money. He really does gamble all their funds away. He expects her inheritance to pay for his lifestyle. Like, none of that stuff is being a good husband.
No, I mean, he's just so charming. You just want to forgive it. There is the alternate endings, right? In the novel, Johnny serves his sick wife a drink, which she knows to be poison, and voluntarily gulps it down because she loves him. Another ending for the movie that was considered, Lena's Joan Fontaine writing a letter to her mother stating that she fears Johnny is going to poison her, at which point he walks in with the milk, that drink. She finishes the letter, seals the stamp, asks Johnny to mail it, then drinks the milk. The final shot would have shown him leaving the house and dropping it into a mailbox, which incriminates himself. When I was watching this movie, first of all, that is the best and most memorable bit in the film. They get that kind of Hitchcock and classic noir where the whole room is dark and a door opens up and you see this figure walk in and it's Cary Grant holding the milk. And they lit the milk. Like it was like a random happenstance where like someone in the art department had bought these little lights, I think. And they lit, or maybe I'm conflating that with something else, but they lit the milk. So the milk takes on this like otherworldly quality. You're watching it and you're hypnotized by it. And I'm thinking to myself, she doesn't know if he's trying to kill her. He might be, he might not be. To me, the ending is where I thought it would have been perfect is he gives her the milk. He says, drink the milk and have a good night's rest, honey, right? And he leaves the room. She looks at the milk, not sure what to do, and we cut. We just leave it at the audience at that point. And because in the same way that, the Sopranos ending was like open-ended, but it's like now, whether it's today or another day, this is always going to be with her, right? So I thought that would have been a perfect Hitchcockian ending to this.
Yeah. And I mean, even though there is a little bit of ambiguity in the actual ending, I think, unfortunately, whether it was the studio or Hitchcock or a combination, they needed more of a definitive resolution about, did Cary Grant kill Beaky? Is he trying to kill Lena? And at least in the moment there, we seem to be assured that A, he did not kill Beaky, and B, he is not trying to kill Lena. There is still the sense that, as I was saying before, he's still not a good guy, but also the sense that maybe he is capable of this kind of thing in the future under other circumstances if he gets more desperate. But there's not nearly as much ambiguity as what you just described.
Right. I think, like you said, it's clear to me he didn't kill Beaky. And he turns the car around. They're going to go home and, it'll be nice for a day or two until she starts suspecting him again. But, they're driving on this like kind of real rigid road. And there's a lot of opportunities there where maybe he does try to kill her, but she throws him off. Or maybe she thinks he's trying to kill her and she throws him off and he dies and then finds out that he was innocent this whole time, right? There's all these, or, the ending as it is, they turn around and he thinks everything's happy. And then we see Cary Grant look back with like a kind of wry smile, knowing like, hey, it's just going to happen another time. I feel like there was just a missed opportunity to heighten it a little more.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there was probably a way to do that while preserving the image of Cary Grant or whatever that the studio might have insisted on, or Hitchcock might have wanted as well. So that is disappointing. At the same time, I think as I was watching this and not remembering a ton about it leading up to the ending, I was in a way expecting it to be more disappointing. I thought, oh, this isn't going to work out. And I felt like it at least stuck with the idea of her paranoia, and it didn't just excuse everything on either end. And so I like that. And everything building up to it was very effective. And you are really kind of kept guessing throughout the film about, is he really doing these terrible things or is she paranoid? And Hitchcock doesn't go overboard with her like becoming mentally unhinged, nor does he go overboard with, and Cary Grant doesn't go overboard with like evil looks or whatever, or, sinister insinuations or anything. So you really have that balance throughout the movie.
I think everything, like we said, where there were a few problems here and there that we've already spoken about. And it's the ending that just takes this thing down a notch. But everything up until that point is as expected. Hitchcock, Grant, Fontaine, like just simmering and really kind of hitting.
Should we talk about Beaky?
Beaky rules, man. Beaky is one of these, like I mentioned, those two, kind of lecherous uncles. He's just fun. I like Beaky. I just enjoyed this character. I enjoyed this actor. And I liked seeing him. I really enjoyed everything he was doing in this film. And he's just one of these like loyal friends to the Cary Grant, to Johnny. And he's like, well, you have to, no, you're right. I'm getting too Cary Grant. You have to excuse all of his behaviors because he's just so much fun. And this is just who he is. And we love him for who he is. Oh, he wants to start a real estate company. I don't need to see where he wants to build the land. I'll just trust him on this. Like, Beaky rules.
And he is the weird combination of like naive and trusting and also self-aware because I mean the introduction to him in a way when he first comes to visit is he's telling Lena when she says what happened to these, antique chairs that her father had given them as a wedding present. And Beaky says, "Oh, ask Johnny about what happened to the chairs and see what kind of crazy lie he comes up with." Like he knows what Johnny's whole deal is, that Johnny is going to make up a story because he sold these chairs to get money to go gambling. And he's completely right. And when Johnny delivers his ridiculous lie, Beaky is kind of nudging Lena. So we get the sense that he's very aware of Johnny's shortcomings. But like you said, on the other hand, he's just kind of trusting, like, yeah, sure, you want me to borrow money on my investments for this real estate deal? I don't even understand how that works, but yeah, here's all my money, go for it. And is only brought back from that because Johnny says, actually, let's not do it.
Did you think that, Johnny at some point keeps saying how broke he is? I don't know if we got a full-fledged picture of that. He's so well dressed and well kept, and I know he's looking for a job, and he's relying on doing illegal activities to make money. But I didn't necessarily feel like he was that far in the hole here.
Well, I think he's presented, and I feel like this is a not uncommon kind of movie character where he puts on a front. He probably spends all his money on those nice clothes so that he can look the part of the playboy in the upper class milieu, and he can go to the like riding events or whatever and get all these women around him. And that I feel like I got the impression that before he met Lena, and he does tell her at one point that he's been with like 73 women or something like that, right?
Hello.
Yeah, exactly, which is a little risque for a Code era film, but that he's just kind of gone from one of those. He's a gigolo, basically. He is relying on these women for financial support, and he is providing them with companionship in return. And so when he gets Selena, it's like, oh, now I'm going to get married. And whatever the reason, maybe he actually really does like her. And we could debate whether that's true. But either way, he's also using her in the same way that he's used all these other wealthy women. And that was kind of the impression I got, that he never had any money, but he schemed his way into society.
That's the dream, buddy.
Is how you're looking to become a gigolo, much like Cary Grant in this film?
Hasn't worked out for me so far. So I find myself becoming poorer and poorer with this plan.
Maybe you need to find a wife you can murder for her inheritance.
I wouldn't be a good, kind of scam artist at this because it just, first of all, I don't like to lie anyway, but also like just keeping up a lie sounds so exhausting, right? And the murder, again, it's just not for me, Josh.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad. I feel like it's been a while since we clarified our anti-murder.
Yeah, we're still on the murder is bad, take on this whole thing.
Yeah. So, do you think that Johnny loved Lena?
That's a good question. I'm going to say yes based on the movie. I will say that yes. I think they presented enough evidence. You mentioned the chairs, right? And what's one of the things he does, which I thought was very effective. He buys her all these gifts, which seem like, this is nonsense. How could you do this to me? And then he's like, and here's a receipt. I got all the chairs back, which was like cool and thoughtful and showed that he was a little more than one-dimensional in his thinking. So yeah, I think he loves her. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably does, and that there's no reason he can't love her, but also be unable to kind of curtail his bad behavior, because this is just the way he's lived his entire life. And to him, like hawking those chairs so that he can get money to gamble and then win at the track and then buy the chairs back is just the way things are done. That's just the normal course of action. And of course, like it's not, you're saying it's thoughtful. And it's thoughtful from his perspective. But
yes, exactly. It's an asshole thing, but for him, it's like a romantic gesture, right?
right,
So,
right. Because that's all that he understands. And that's the way that he's been living his entire life. You could imagine him hawking his own prized possessions to get money to gamble, to then maybe go back and rebuy them, because that's just the way he lives. So I think within his world, he does probably love her. And that's why, if the ending works, it's because he's genuinely hurt that she thinks he's going to murder her.
I also think they did another thing because, like you mentioned, the embezzling, he's stealing money from his cousin to pay stuff off and he can't pay it back. And I took it at face value where he's like, look, I tried all these things. None of it worked. I'm just going to take my punishment and go to jail. And it's like, that's the movie version of this character. The book version is probably a little, like we said, a little grimier. Do you think, Josh, it would have been effective instead of talking about all these off-screen scams if we had seen him run a scam or take advantage of someone besides the wife?
I mean, maybe, but I feel like if we did that, you lose some of the ambiguity, because even though we learn for certain, like, for example, that he embezzled the money, you want the paranoia of not knowing. You want to discover it as Lena discovers it. Right. And so she doesn't witness the actual act. She only learns about it because she goes to see the cousin and is concerned about Johnny. And then the cousin says, oh, yeah, I fired him a month ago because he stole money. And this is the first that she's hearing of it. And we should hear about it just as she does. So I don't know if there are any scenes of Johnny doing stuff where Lena is not present in the whole movie.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there are the scenes with him and the other women at the beginning, and then there are scenes of just him and Beaky together. But I agree with you. I didn't necessarily need to see that one because that reveal is so important from her. I just think we could have seen him, we get right into it. They meet right away and he's like trying to cheat his way into first class, right? If you had made this today, would there be 10 minutes of him kind of philandering and trying to scam other women first? Or would we see him and Beaky have a conversation? And Beaky, like you said, is maybe more innocent in this whole thing. Maybe he's just not aware of what's going on. Maybe he's ultra aware of what's going on. We don't really know. That's the genius of Beaky, Josh. But I don't know. I know we're just throwing ideas at the wall and like, hey, how do you take the most iconic director of all time and improve his movie, right? So, Josh, do you agree with me though? Like, like I said, I talk about environment a lot. I feel like you can't do better than what Hitchcock does with environments in his films.
Yeah, I mean, and this is all shot on sound stages. So he has created a world, and you talked about how Green Was My Valley, and that in a way is similar. That was a recreation of a real location that they weren't able to shoot at. But here he has invented this village or whatever. And I think he really gives you a sense of that community. And as you were talking about before, the society where everyone is very judgmental, where we kind of feel for Johnny because people are so judgmental of him because he's an outsider or because he doesn't have the exact proper kind of breeding or manners or whatever. And yeah, I think Hitchcock can create these worlds, and they're not necessarily like realistic worlds, but they're worlds that we are immersed in. And I think that is the case here as well.
And, using these other kind of Grant projects with him, right? You got the French Riviera for To Catch a Thief, which is beautiful and stunning, right? And then you have this kind of South America kind of getaway where Nazis are hiding and notorious. And that really feels a little more upper society. Maybe you don't get as much of like the local flavor there. And then, of course, North by Northwest, you get some of the most amazing environmental set pieces of all time. You're thinking like, oh, how did you stage this whole Mount Rushmore sequence or the crop duster sequence in the 50s? And you're like, this guy, like, yes, all the accolades in the world, even if the Oscars won't give it to him.
Yeah, I mean, and that's going back to like that sort of lesser known film that I just watched this week, Murder, which is from 1930. And that's in the early sound era where you really aren't able to move the camera very much because the microphones are fixed. And he still finds these really inventive ways to whether it's through editing or voiceover or camera movement when characters aren't talking or whatever, to bring this kind of startlingly creative approach to the material, which in that case is pretty mediocre, and here is of course better. But it's really impressive either way.
I agree. It's awesome. I was rewatching Rear Window, and like there's this opening sequence and you're seeing like the entire community and how he's moving the camera. And you could do this for any movie he's made. Obviously, we know in Psycho, it's the editing technique and the shower scene and North by Northwest or the crop duster scene. I think technically you would say there's probably never been a better craftsman in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I love a lot of these movies. I would say, I wouldn't necessarily say that Alfred Hitchcock is my like personal favorite director, but I think if you asked me who is the greatest director of all time, I would say Alfred Hitchcock.
And who might you say is your personal favorite director?
I mean, for me, it would be someone more that I grew up with, like the Coen brothers or something like that.
And this is my point, Josh. And who do you think one of their favorite directors is? Right.
Course, so, yeah. I mean, I'm not, and that's why I was sort of contrasting that, because it's not to say that they or anyone is better than Hitchcock, but just, for my personal affinity.
Josh, you had said something in the epilogue and it kind of resounded with me here. And when I was watching these movies, because we were talking about, it was either in the epilogue or the planning of another season. We were talking about the romantic comedy he made. What film is that? And
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
So this year,
from this year, yeah,
right. And you're like, that's his only comedy. And yes, you're right. But in every movie, there's really good humor, like really funny stuff in this. And in this movie, it's there. And I feel like that might be an underrated aspect of what he's able to accomplish on film.
Yeah, I mean, he does have that sort of wry sense of humor. And I think Mr. and Mrs. Smith is the only comedy that he made during his sort of heyday, the success period. But I think in his early 20s and 30s period, there may be a comedy or two in there when he was jumping around, working for hire, doing whatever material he was offered. And that might be in there as well. But certainly once he became a big famous director, that's the one. But you're right. There is a lot of humor here. And that's what I was talking about too, in that if you didn't know what this movie was about, and of course the title also kind of tips you off, but still, you could almost watch the first 30, 40 minutes of this film and think it was just a romantic comedy about, this playboy and this sort of timid woman falling in love and the disapproval of the people around them before you get to the suspense part of it.
Josh, obviously there's been, more writing and analysis than we could go into on Hitchcock. But you want to talk a little about how his female characters are similar to one another or how they stand out in certain ways? Like I really thought in To Catch a Thief, the Grace Kelly character really gave as good as she got there. I thought that was one of the better female characterizations of his, kind of entire filmography. And I think the Ingrid Bergman character is really interesting and notorious as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the ironies maybe, because there are many stories of Hitchcock on a personal level treating these women like shit. And these actresses, especially like Tippi Hedren in The Birds, there's a whole movie about that. But that aside, in the material, and I think maybe part of it goes to the fact that Alma Revel, as you were mentioning, his wife, was often his screenwriter and is a strong woman herself and is giving that characterization to these female characters in the script, that they do have a lot more presence. They do have a lot more agency. And as I was saying, one good thing about this movie is that it doesn't just turn Lena into some sort of hysterical woman who completely falls apart emotionally. Like, she is paranoid and she is upset, but at the same time, she's able to take action related to that and formulate plans and discern what it is that she should do. And early in the film, she also is very independent. She's able to say to her family, look, I love Johnny and I'm going to marry Johnny, and that's what it is. And so I think you're right, but I think there's also a weird dichotomy between that and Hitchcock's relationship with these women in reality.
Well, yeah, and a lot of it is they're always playing Stand By Your Man or second fiddle, right? In a lot of ways. And a lot of this is, and it speaks to, he would be such an interesting filmmaker today because if you read about him, right, he had getting back to things being pent up, Josh, he had a lot of sexual urges that were never explored in real life, and he kind of put them on film. And there is a lot of titillation in his movies, right? And you wonder, like, had he been able to take that into the 70s, what would that have looked like and whatnot? So there's all types of energies bounding against each other and exploding or not exploding in certain ways on screen. So.
Yeah, and I mean, related to female characters, one thing that I wanted to mention that really struck me this time that I don't recall before is the obvious lesbian couple in this film of Isabel, the mystery writer, and her partner, who dresses in a male suit and is there when they go to dinner with her and is never remarked upon, is a very minor character, only shows up in that dinner scene. But to me, it was very clear that this was a lesbian couple. And I was struck at how matter of fact that was presented in the film. And it's not a plot point. It's not to reveal some sort of deviance or anything like that. It's just like, hey, this lady has her female partner here. And I thought that was impressive.
And like you said, Cary Grant's going around, banging everybody. And that's talking about it in 1941. So it's good that we're, looking at it from more modern takes. You got to bang everybody, Josh, right?
Sure. That's the message here, I think, ultimately.
Oh, good. I'm glad I got that out there for us then.
Yeah. So, Dave, I feel like you were slightly less into this than we were.
Well, I mean, first of all, I just want to say you were talking about all the great camera work and the great sets. I love that we're moving from this to a Marvel movie next week. So that's a good transition. But
with no sets, literally no sets at all.
None at all. But no, I like this movie. And I mean, it's certainly the work of a master. I mean, it looks incredible. Every frame of this thing looks amazing and the acting is great and everything. But you talked about it a little bit, how the first 40 minutes or so, you could think that this is just like a romantic comedy or something. And I just did not feel suspense out of this. And I mean, I know that this is the master of suspense, but I just where is that suspense exactly? But I liked it on another level, but I just thought that it was going to get a little bit darker and a little bit more menacing. And even, that ending I know most people don't really like the ending, but I just didn't think it worked at all. And it's just for a movie that is supposed to be about suspense, I really just didn't get any of that out of it. And so that's why I'm kind of lukewarm on it.
You heard it here first. Dave Rosen calls Hitchcock a bum.
That's what I said. Exactly.
A hack.
In those words.
Loser.
Did you not feel suspense when eventually it builds up her paranoia?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly recognized her as being paranoid. I just didn't think it played out in a way that was building towards anything. It was just she's just clearly paranoid about the situation. It just didn't feel like in a cinematic way that it was building in any way.
Dave, just between us, what's the worst thing you ever suspected Gina of doing?
I don't know that I could think of anything. She's a good kid.
Yeah,
that's
nice. See, that's the right answer, right? That's Johnny and Lena would not give that answer, and that's why their relationship is doomed.
Yeah. Have you ever dated someone you thought has done something totally, unsavory, shall we say?
I mean, I think we could leave it at yes and not go any further. But yeah.
Oh, that's the point. It's a podcast. We want to know what it is.
Jason, did you date a murderer?
Yes, but by accident. So this is a sad story, right? This woman came to a show. We went out, hung out a few times, and she just told me she had done something terrible, but didn't. And I didn't follow up. I didn't know her well enough, right? So I Googled her because we're writers, Josh. You got to research these people. Apparently, she drove drunk and murdered two elderly women in this drunk driving situation. So
all right. Well, that's
not great.
Really
happy. I'm just. You asked a question. I had to give you an answer.
Can I just say, let's just bring it to a happier place. I can't believe we're 54 minutes in and you guys haven't mentioned monkey face yet.
Oh yeah, he does say monkey face
a lot, constantly,
million times
through the whole movie. Yeah.
And I feel like that's a good, really early indicator of him being a bad guy because he gives her this super condescending nickname that he makes up for her and then continues to use it throughout their marriage and never really asks whether she likes it or not. He decides this is what you're called and it's kind of rude. And then he just keeps calling her that.
I feel like Jason makes up nicknames like that for you all the time.
But I haven't called him Nerd Face once in this episode, so I feel like I've shown more respect than that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, but it's also part of her characterization that clearly it's not a nice nickname, but she never speaks up and says, "Can you stop calling me Monkey Face?"
Yeah, that's true.
Is there a nice way to call someone Monkey Face, Josh?
No, there's not. I mean, and that's why I think the way to do it is for her to say, "Look, stop calling me Monkey Face."
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I was wondering about that. So.
Yeah, no. So should we rate this out of 5 monkey faces?
Sure. I gave it 3.5. It's like I said, the bottom of the Grant Hitchcock collab list for me, but that shows you how good they all are. It's still a 3.5 for me.
Yeah, 3.5 for me too. And I'm guessing I would put it at the bottom of that list as well. I haven't seen those other films in a really long time, so I'd have to revisit them, but I remember liking them all, especially To Catch a Thief, but all of them very good. So that would be my guess. But still, this is a good one, 3.5 for me. Dave, how do you rate this?
I'm going with 3. It's also the bottom of my Cary Grant, Alfred Hitchcock list, although it's the only one I've seen.
So it's the top,
and the bottom.
Yeah, very, very versatile, really.
Absolutely.
Tops and bottoms would have fit in well with Hitchcock in 1941.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. We'll come back and talk about the legacy of suspicion. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this bonus episode for our season on the films of 1941, we are talking about Alfred Hitchcock's Suspicion. And part of the reason we are talking about this film is because we really wanted to finally talk about an Alfred Hitchcock film. He is, of course, one of the most famous, accomplished directors of all time. As Jason said, he never won an Oscar for Best Director. He was, however, nominated for 5 of those Oscars. One of his films did win Best Picture. That was Rebecca the year before this. I've seen, I think it's 31 Hitchcock films, and there's still several, as I mentioned, notable ones that I haven't seen. My personal favorite is The Birds, which I actually am about to rewatch for an article, but I've seen that a couple times. And I think we've mentioned most of the other ones that I like a lot. Shadow of a Doubt is another one, which we, I think, mentioned in our Citizen Kane episode because it stars Joseph Cotten, and that is a great film. But really, you can't go wrong pretty much with any Hitchcock.
Yeah, he worked with Joseph Cotten, Foreign Correspondent, also a few times, right?
Yeah. I mean, he collaborated with a lot of these actors more than once. Cary Grant, as we keep saying, but so like
Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, a lot of actors worked with him over and over again.
My favorite, and I haven't seen it since college, but I might rewatch it this week. And one that we haven't mentioned is Strangers on a Train, and not just because it's the basis for the '80s comedy Throw Mama from the Train, but Strangers on a Train is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one that I haven't seen in a long time, but is a Patricia Highsmith adaptation, and that stuff is always great. To the author of The Talented Mr. Ripley, and I watched a bunch of Ripley films not that long ago and was impressed with the way that she, the complexity of her characterization and plotting, and I think that comes across in that film as well. I mean, Hitchcock also had a whole TV career as the host and creator of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and became one of these directors whose personal image, he was a big pop culture figure himself with that silhouette that he would kind of walk into, and the way that I don't know if you have a Hitchcock impression, Jason, but
just my bald head. No.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'd have to really work on it. But like you said, look, Truffaut Hitchcock's probably one of the most highly regarded film books of all time, where for like Hitchcock's maybe 61st birthday, Truffaut sat with him for 5 days straight, just asking him questions. And it took him like 5 years to put together the actual transcript of it. And like you also mentioned, how many movies has he been the subject of?
Right. I mean, and there will be more. I think there's a Truffaut Hitchcock movie. And so documentaries.
There's a documentary.
Documentaries and fiction films. I think Anthony Hopkins has played him, and Toby Jones. And I'm sure there will be more going forward. So we have talked about Cary Grant multiple times, Only Angels Have Wings, and in this 1941 season, we talked about The Philadelphia Story. We talked about his work with Hitchcock. Jason's going to keep working on that impression.
Yeah, but you know, just listen to those episodes if you want to know more about Cary Grant, guys.
Yes, indeed. Joan Fontaine, I think we also talked about. She was in The Women, although she had a fairly small role there.
I must have blocked this out.
Yeah, Jason's least favorite film, but she had just worked with Hitchcock on Rebecca, and she was a huge star of classic Hollywood. Jane Eyre, Letter from an Unknown Woman by Max Ophuls, who we talked about with The Earrings of Madame de in 1953, The Constant Nymph, Ida Lupino's The Bigamist, tons and tons of stuff. And later in her career, lots of TV roles, lots of stage roles, and also very well known for the sibling rivalry with Olivia de Havilland, her sister.
As we had mentioned, the only siblings to have won lead acting Oscars. And Josh, what film was Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine in before this together?
Oh, I feel like I should have looked that up, but I don't know.
Gunga Din.
A film that I have not seen. So I was thinking about this. This is sort of unrelated, but Jason, what sibling duo do you think could break that record and win leading actor Oscars?
That is
now?
A good question. I think that, just from a talent standpoint, I think the Gyllenhaals have that talent right there, just off the top of my head. Like, I'm going through the actors list in my head, and that's probably my top pick at the moment.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. The Gyllenhaals, or maybe Dakota Fanning and Elle Fanning. I don't know.
They're good. Yeah, they're good.
Yeah. So I even looked this up because I was like, what about Warren Beatty and Shirley MacLaine? Surely they've both won, but they haven't. So I think that their time has probably passed, though. For that.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Very sad.
So
well, eventually maybe Ben Affleck will get his, and or they.
Oh yeah.
They have,
I mean, in a way, he doesn't have it for acting. He doesn't have it for acting, but yes, he does. Have
right. Well, I mean, and that's the same. Warren Beatty has an Oscar for directing, but not for acting.
Right.
And Shirley MacLaine did win for acting. So yeah, Ben could pull off an acting Oscar maybe at some point.
I think what we might see more than that are more of these kind of generationals, not siblings, but like second and third generation, like we talked about with the Houstons and everything.
Right. And I think that's probably happened before, but the very specific thing with Joan Fontaine and Olivia de Havilland with the siblings and the lead acting Oscars has not
Good question, again. Josh.
Thank you.
You're very insightful.
For some reason, this was like on my mind to the point where I was like brushing my teeth and I was like, but what about Shirley MacLaine and Warren Beatty? And I had to look it up.
He throws his toothbrush down like as it's still like, I should have finished brushing first. That's good. Josh, Beaky, we got to talk about Nigel Bruce. He was Dr. Watson in the New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes film series. He was in Rebecca, Limelight, and Lassie Come Home, and just delightful.
Yeah, I recently watched one of those Sherlock Holmes movies. He and Basil Rathbone were in, I think it's like 14 of them. And Basil Rathbone, one of the most famous actors to play Sherlock Holmes.
Who we've talked about.
Yeah, and
Frankenstein episode.
Yeah, exactly. Son of Frankenstein. And Nigel Bruce plays Dr. Watson kind of like Beaky. Like as this sort of bumbling, like semi-naive, okay, sure, yeah, let's do that. And he has almost a similar relationship with Holmes that Beaky has with Johnny, where Holmes is sort of taking advantage of him in ways that seem kind of mean.
That's good, Josh. I'm all for that. So that sounds fun.
Yeah. Cedric Hardwicke, who plays the father,
who we've talked about before as well,
was on an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, so another person working with Hitchcock. And I was impressed. May Whitty, who plays the mother, who, as we said, kind of disappears in the second half of the film, she was a stage actress starting in the 1880s and didn't begin her film career in earnest until age 72, at which point she was nominated for 2 Oscars in her 70s for Night Must Fall and Mrs. Miniver. She'd also appeared in The Lady Vanishes, the Hitchcock film. So just really an amazing reinvention there.
Helped create British equity, which is like actors' equity. And Josh, just to reiterate, Cedric Hardwicke, I think we talked about in Hunchback of Notre Dame, where he was a bad guy.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. I forgot about that. But just very versatile, all these people. As was the case with many 1940s films, this was adapted for radio 6 times in the 1940s. And I mentioned I was almost tempted to try to watch this because it's on Tubi, but there is a 1988 TV movie version of this starring Anthony Andrews, who I'm not familiar with, in the Cary Grant role, and Jane Curtin as the Joan Fontaine character. So I don't know. Everyone on Letterboxd says it's terrible, and I believe them.
That sounds pretty bad. I do think there's room to remake something like this. And, we've seen this in something like The Invisible Man not too long ago, that kind of paranoia and that build up, and if people will believe them or not.
Right. I mean, I do think that all of that stuff is relevant thematically. You would have to change a lot of the logistics and the details, which apparently in that 1988 version, they do not, including someone on Letterboxd complaining that the Beaky character keeps calling him Old Bean and saying, like, nobody calls anybody Old Bean in 1988.
I think you can get away with that. I used to have if he's a teacher, teachers like saying stuff like that. I had a teacher who used to say Old Bean and stuff like that. So gives him charm.
Maybe you and I should start calling each other Old Bean in our casual conversations.
I'm into it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's going to work.
All right. That's an idea anyway.
Anything else you want to say about the legacy of this film?
Old Bean.
All right. No, it was a little better. We'll keep at it. So that is Suspicion. And that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can suspect us online and on social media.
You can find us at awesomemovieyear.com. Awesome Movie Year on the gram and on the FB. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or Jay Harris Comedy, and all the things. Go for Jason on Letterboxd.
You can find some old stuff from me, including maybe some Hitchcock commentary at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky, and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this film or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And check out our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. And you can also follow me on Letterboxd by David Rosen.
And thank you to everyone who is listening on Patreon. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you have gotten early access to this bonus episode. And if you are not, and you are listening later, Dave, how can people sign up for the Patreon?
They can check it out at patreon.com/bydavidrosen. It's the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, which combines bonus content from Awesome Movie Year, as well as my podcast, Piecing It Together, and my music career. Just all kinds of great stuff that you can get there. Early access, bonus stuff, and all kinds of great things to check out. It's, again, patreon.com/bydavidrosen.
We always have a bonus episode at the end of the season that we offer up to our Patreon subscribers. So thank you again to all of them. And thank you for listening. And bye.
Goodbye, Old Beans.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
Didn't know how to end it there.
I got you. Don't worry about it.